Welcome to the Tom Heck for Governor Digital Town Hall. Drop into the group chat and join the conversation. This is your chance to get to know Tom, make a comment, or ask him anything you want to know about his plans as the next governor of Nevada. And Tom will take your comments and your questions and answer them live. If you'd like to join the Tom Heck team as a volunteer, to make a donation, or both, please visit electheck.com. Now, without any further ado, let's get the show rolling. Welcome to the Tom Heck for Governor Digital Town Hall.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Tim Kramer, and tonight we are doing again our digital town hall, where every Monday night we talk to the citizens of Nevada to talk about what Tom Heck is going to do for you as governor when elected. We've got some big issues coming up tonight, and let's bring Tom in here. Tom, how are you doing this afternoon?
Good. I'm happy to be here. I always love to hear from people out there who are interested in solving the problems in Nevada. It's really a great state, and we need to do better.
Well, and that's the issue, right? I mean, that's really what this job is about. The governor of Nevada is a CEO of the state. Kind of explain what your position is and how you view the job of governor and how the current governor has been doing it wrong and what you'll do different.
Well, the current governor spends most of his time down in Las Vegas. He's just like our guy in the White House, Biden, leading from behind. When you're a leader, you got to be out front. You got to be setting the agenda. You got to be setting goals and objectives, and you ought to be hiring the best of the best for the people in Nevada, because that's what their hard-earned tax dollars deserve. We can't afford to hire mediocre employees, and that's what I'll do as governor. We'll revolutionize government and politics in Nevada.
Well, it's interesting that in saying that, these candidates have made a lot of promises, and they come in and they say, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. But you've led huge organizations, and some of these promises that they're making, are they realistic in the long run or even in the short?
Well, most of these guys are career politicians, and they've been doing this for 40 years. I guess I turn it back on the Nevadans. How do you feel about what these career politicians have done over the last 40 years? If you're like me, it's abysmal failure, and we can't continue to accept that. My experience, first off, the Air Force Academy was a leadership lab, and so that's where I learned from the best of the best. From the day I got there, I was a follower, and then the last 3 years, I was always leading some type of group of men or women. And so as governor, you got to be out front. You got to be setting the agenda, both with the staff and with the legislature. And I am very adept at doing that. I've got significant education and significant experience as being a leader and out front. The last thing that's most important about a leader, he's got to have strong intestinal fortitude to do the right things, even when it's difficult or when there's a lot of naysayers out there.
Well, that's a key. That's why we don't like career politicians, because they get in and they get bought, they get owned, they get what's it called, leveraged. People use what they know about these people, good and bad, against them. Why do you think that we're in the situation that we're in right now in this state? Do you think that Joe Lombardo? Do you think that Trump wanted to choose Joe Lombardo, endorse Joe Lombardo, or do you think he was just looking for a win?
Well, it's the corrupt Republican Party. I mean, for all of you in the audience, the way I learned this goes down is that the Republican Party says, hands off, we're not going to do anything. We can't support candidates in the primary. Then the politically elite donate all that money to the chosen one, or the person whose next turn it is. And that's the problem in Nevada. Joe has no more experience than the police. In the military, our future job was dependent on how we did on our last job. I ask you voters out there, how has Joe Lombardo done in this job right now? He's been abysmal failure there. If you look at his crime rate, it's double that in New York City and Los Angeles. I mean, if you can't do that job when it's very minuscule, or I shouldn't say minuscule, but very limited in scope, then how can you expect him to be your governor and actually make a difference for Nevada in securing? First off, he's never secured the state and made people feel safe. There's more shootings in Las Vegas than there are in those other cities. Education, there's no way he can figure out how to deal with education if he can't figure out what he's done with the police force in Las Vegas. And then creating jobs and an environment that's great for jobs and for he hasn't done that. I saw him on the stage. He was asked about taxes and regulation. taxes is that the guy before him says, yeah, we're going to cut taxes, we're going to cut regulations. Joe Lombardo says, I guess we call him status quo Joe, but he says, well, we'll have to look at the taxes because we might need them. And so I'm not going to make any promises there. And then what regulations? We might need some of those regulations. We have way too much government in Nevada. I am committed to the voters. I'm going to cut government. Day one, I'm going to do a 10% budget cut. We're going to learn to live within our means and to do better with what we got. And we're going to eliminate those failing programs.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because what ended up happening is during COVID, everybody else, all the citizens, every citizen had to tighten their belt during COVID. Not as much money coming in, can't spend as much, right? Now prices have gone up. And these politicians are coming back now and saying, listen, hey, we lost a lot of tax revenue during COVID, so we're going to have to raise taxes. Do you expect that to happen with Lombardo or Sisolak if they're allowed to stay in?
Well, first off, what you need to know when you have this type of inflation, all the prices are going up. So 10% of a dollar is, or 10% of $10 is a dollar. 10% of $20 is $2. The revenue is coming in leaps and bounds. So what Sisolak has done, what Lombardo will do, they're not going to look out for the taxpayer dollar. They're going to do the same old, status quo Joe. That's the best you can hope for. I mean, Nevadans deserve much, much better than that.
So one of the big issues, and by the way, before we get started here, for anyone who's joining us tonight, you can join us on Facebook, you can join us on Twitter, as well as Rumble and YouTube. And on Facebook or on the website, if you go to electtech.com, you can actually log in. You don't have to log in and give your name and everything. You just say, I want to join. And you can chat with Tom right now. Ask him a question direct. If you want to find out something specifically from a candidate who is running to be governor of the state of Nevada, right now is your chance to do it, your opportunity. So jump in and ask Tom a question so that I don't have to ask him all of them. That's basically what it comes down to. I get lazy at some point. So let's move forward. The biggest issue in the state right now has to be inflation. That's what's on everybody's mind. That's the third rail right now of politics, especially for Democrats. But let's talk about what you can do something about inflation today. And even on your first day, you don't have much of an impact as governor on inflation, other than creating an environment where inflation is lessened. Would you agree? That's your job.
Right. But the biggest driver of this is the gasoline prices. I think gasoline's up like 43%. Well, as governor, I would just suspend the gas tax. And if I needed to go to the legislature and get their concurrence, we have a board that does that. I would get their concurrence. We'll suspend the gas tax until such time as we deem that we're out of the woods. But I'm telling you, from what I've seen of inflation, I expect inflation for the next 10 years. Nevadans can't afford to have a weak governor. They need someone strong, tough, and motivated to solve these problems. And inflation is going up.
Somebody specifically trained to do exactly what you want to do. I mean, this isn't like you just wanted to be governor, right? I mean, you're specifically trained to do this. So Tom, talk about the training of why the Air Force utilized your service and your education and your unique abilities to run so many programs, successful programs, huge programs in the Air Force.
Well, in my career in the Air Force was 23 years. And then I had 9 years in local government, and I've run 50 different functional areas, 50 different departments, if you will, 20 different agencies, and I was always brought them up to benchmark activities. My training comes from being a staffer. I was a staffer for 9 years. What that means is I did papers for senior people, for general officers. I did briefings for them. I met with senators. I met with congressmen. And I basically provided information, and basically the act of actually being a staffer in huge organizations like, we have the Combatant Command in Southcom, which is out of Miami right now and runs Central and South America. I mean, there was thousands and thousands of people in the headquarters, and then down in the field, we had probably upwards of 50,000 people in our purview. And so it was all about doing the staff work to make sure that the general officers had the right information to make the right decisions. But understanding that process is what I bring to the state of Nevada. The problem with the state of Nevada, it's the good old boy system. You all know that. The good old boy system means that I'm doing what the guy before me did, what the guy before him did, and chances are the guy before him did it wrong. So we're going to start fresh. We're going to go back to source documents, and we're going to institute a process that I learned in managing in these different headquarters jobs, where you had to have a systematic process to make sure everything was in alignment before you launched on what you were going to do.
And that process is not currently being utilized in government, correct?
No, it's certainly not being done at all in the state of Nevada. They don't know what a process is. You know, the other thing in the military we did, we were big on is checklist. You know, why would we checklist? Well, airplanes, as you know, are very complex mechanical devices, if you will. And the complexity therefore requires some systematic approach to starting up the engine, flying the aircraft, and shutting down the engine. So the pilots have what they call a dash one. And the dash one goes through exactly what you do every step of the way. Nevada doesn't have that. Every time we do something, we reinvent the wheel and come up with a new way of doing it, when the systematic approach is what pleases the citizens. And we don't even have a telephone system that's responsive. This Nevada state government is ineffective, inefficient, has no processes and no methodology what they do. They can't even answer their phones and return messages.
Well, Tom, one of the things that happens, now you're making a lot of claims here. You're saying a lot of negative things about the people that are currently in office, right? And that's what candidates do. I can do it better. But politicians always want you to believe that, well, don't vote for the devil you don't know, vote for the devil you do know, right? Do you think that that is harmful to the people of Nevada if they continue down this path? I mean, we always talk about, we want, term limits, but that's what elections are. If you look at it, they've been termed out. They served 2 years. You get the chance to tell them that that they can or can't serve again. All of these things combined, do you think that that's hurting the state? And if so, how do you intend to fix it?
Well, absolutely. I would tell all the voters out there, you are the term limits. The problem is that the Republican Party convinces you to vote for the guy with money. Have you ever heard the Republican Party say, vote for the best candidate who you think can do the job? I'm running primarily because there's no one else that can do this job. They don't have the experience. They don't have the broad breadth of experience. They don't have the broad breadth of knowledge, and they don't have the broad breadth of education. A lot of my education from a management and business administration degree that I have makes me understand how this works together. And people say, you can't run government by like a business. Baloney. Every job I've had to date, I've run like a business because I treat taxpayer dollars as if they were my own. And when you feel ownership of taxpayer dollars, that's when you are able to solve these problems. The career politicians today are too busy keeping their jobs instead of doing their jobs. And they're abysmal failure. All Nevadans have to do is look at education, 50th in the nation. And in the last 8 years, we've spent 40% more money on education. It's not a money problem, people. Florida spends the same amount we do. They're third. It's an accountability problem. And that's what I bring, is accountability to the state of Nevada government.
Well, that's one of the big things that people talk about all the time. That what's the difference between, corporate America and political America? Well, it's accountability. Politicians don't have to be accountable. They have an endless supply of clients that they can force to pay at the point of a gun. I mean, that's what the government has the ability to do. No company out there can arrest you. No company can put you in jail, but the government can. So they're a monopoly on this issue. And when they don't take the right stance and they're actually working against the people, like is what's happening in Nevada right now, you need strong candidates to stand up with a backbone to say it's time to change. Because change, this is the big word, change, and Tom will get into this here in a moment, change is hard for people. Tom, you've led teams for years. Talk about the psychology of the resistance to change within large organizations.
Well, people are pretty much locked into their behavior. Behavior in people doesn't change without either a significant emotional event or consequence. So the significant emotional event is using something that's self-determined, but consequences is what politicians fail to do. Most politicians want everybody to be happy. When you're being a change agents go into organization, and you don't make people happy because you're doing the hard things that the career politicians have failed to do for 40 years. I'm going to cut the top 3 layers of leadership in Nevada. Why am I going to do that? Because that's how you immediately change the culture from the citizens need to respect us and kowtow to us, and we're going to tell the citizens what to do, to an organization that's responsive, effective, and efficient, and always responds to citizens' needs and requests. That's what they're paid to do, and citizens deserve better than what they're getting now. I've been a change agent. My last job, I ran the logistics in the South Pacific for the Reagan ballistic missile test site. I mean, I worked for a joint venture between Lockheed and Bechtel. They were going to fire us. I quickly got in there, developed the
well. Hold on, let me stop you there, Tom. Let me stop you. When you say they were going to fire you, or they were going to fire us, explain what you mean. Not you personally. You were coming in to save two large companies, right? So explain, because Lockheed Martin, not a small company, so the U.S. government was going to fire Lockheed Martin, and you came in to save the project. So go for. I just want to make sure that people were clear on why what was going on.
It was Lockheed and Bechtel joint venture that I worked for, and I was working for Chugach, and I came in there, and the government agent told me, we're ready to fire you guys, and I says, no, give me a chance to fix it. Turned it around in short order. By the time I left, the last year and a half or two, I was getting max bonuses because I fixed it. Because why? Because we produced results. We in the Air Force never got credit for trying and fighting, as some of your political hacks have talked about in their campaign for governor. It's about results. I am committed to common sense solutions that produce successful outcomes, truth telling at the expense of political correctness, always doing the right thing, and most importantly, being the voice for the silent majority. That's my commitment to the voters.
Well, I think one of the questions, you and I have been talking about it at length, and I think that the majority of people in the country are in this position. Are you sick of the crap yet? Are you sick of it? Are you sick of the same guys over and over and over again? Look at who's running right now in the state of Nevada. Look at the candidates that you have. They're all rehashed, reused career politicians, or the family of career politicians. And you're expecting different results from the same group? That's like planting corn and expecting to get beans. So Tom is a change agent, which means it's going to be uncomfortable. Yeah, it's not going to be the best of the best all the time. And no, there's going to be infighting, and there's going to be gnashing of teeth between Democrats and Republicans. That's how we get change made. And it has to be made because the education system in this state is terrible. With that being said, we're going to play Tom's new commercial. It's airing now across the state. Let you take a look at it, and then we'll come back and talk about Tom's plans for education.
I approve this message.
Why is the Nevada education system last in the nation? Simple. Career politicians don't care about your children's education. If they did, Nevada wouldn't rank last. Tom Heck is running for governor for one reason: to revolutionize Nevada state government, beginning with education. But if 50th place is good enough for your kids, just keep voting for the career politicians. Otherwise, it's time to vote for a proven conservative leader. It's time to vote Tom Heck for governor.
And there you go. That's the plan. I mean, that is one of the things that Tom's going to be taking on. So Tom, let's talk about education and why it is so important to you, and why it should be important not only to the people of Nevada, but more important, the career politicians in this state.
Well, my parents both had college degrees from the 40s, and they made it important to me. And what I've learned over the years is the fact that I had all this education. It gave me opportunities. It gave me opportunities in the military. It got me promoted. It gave me opportunities in the civilian world. I was even a town manager as part of local government. So it's about opportunities and future success. The career politicians are destroying your children's future. It's unacceptable to me, and I'm sure it's unacceptable to you. Education is absolutely paramount, providing opportunities, whether it be vocational technology or whether it be a college track. Both of those give people opportunities, give your children opportunities to raise a family successfully and have a great life. The problem in Nevada is we've stolen that from our children. We've stolen that with our children for 40 years. I mean, this 50th in the country is not a new thing. It's been going on for 50 years or 40 years. So if that's unacceptable to you, then let me get in there and I'll fix it. Vote for me to fix your education, and I will. My commitment, I believe it's so important right after your security.
Let's talk about that. What will you do? What's the key to fixing this problem in Nevada? I mean, you've got two different systems, right? You've got Clark County, which is a huge school system that needs to be broken up, and then you've got the challenge of the rurals, and you've got the other large cities around the state. But you've got this big system in Las Vegas, and then the rurals. What's your plan to fix it so these children, whether they be in the rurals or in the richest neighborhood of Las Vegas, how are you going to be able to give them the same kind of educational opportunities, even though they're so vastly different? What's your plan for that?
Well, I always like to start at a higher level. The higher level of all this is accountability. And where do you get accountability from in the education? It's got to be the Nevada Department of Education to start the accountability. And I'll trickle down from there. But the accountability, right now, the Department of Education passes out money to the school districts, washes their hands of it, and they're done with it. I ask you as parents, you send your kid to the grocery store, you ask them to buy some things, and you give them some money. You just have them throw it on the counter and walk away? No, you check the items he got, you check how much money he spent and how much money he had left. Well, when I'm your governor, we're going to stop this, throw it out there and be done with it. We're going to go out there and partner with each of the school districts, determine their financial needs, but only against goals and objectives that they are required to meet for spending of that money. And then following that, we will have outcomes. They will have to produce outcomes that get us out of 50th in the nation. Of course, following that process, we do an end of year reconciliation to see that they spent the money on what they said it was, that they met their goals and objectives, and they produced the outcomes they said they would to improve our standing in the nation. And then at the same time, Clark County, we need to break that up. That's too big. We'll have to do a study to figure out the best way to do that. But we've got to have a school system that's responsive to the parents. And most importantly, this whole paradigm with Education Nevada changes the minute I can get vouchers approved. And we're going to get school vouchers approved and funded as quickly as possible, either through the legislature or through a referendum.
Well, one of the things that you continually hear, right now, especially with this last year, is CRT and what's the 1619 project? These type of, I think it's the 1619 project. These type of programs that have been pushed into the school system. As governor, what would you do with CRT, and what would you do with these other programs that radicals are trying to push through?
Well, as I've mentioned before in some of these previous casts, I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. I know Governor DeSantis has done a fabulous job with a lot of these things. Governor Abbott, my plan would be prior to my inauguration, I'm going to go visit with them and talk about some of the things that they've done. But one of the key things is, and I've said it before, it's accountability. Accountability is not a comfortable thing for bosses to do. Well, it needs to be done. I'm going to hold people accountable. And so,
well, let's take that back. Let's go back. You've got a backbone of steel, right? So you've led men before. You've led teams before. Why do you think that these managers aren't holding their people accountable? What's the one reason you believe that, and what could solve that?
Well, it's very simple. Back in many years ago, men came tough off the Western plains, and they had to make get their own food and shoot their game, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, we are growing a country that's mostly conflict avoidant. And I would tell you, that was the exact thing I did in Kwajalein when I was there. Every supervisory position, I met with the selected candidate and with my deputy, and we determined whether that person was conflict avoidant or not. And that was our goal. And so my goal is to go through the state of Nevada, and we're going to hire people and make sure they're not conflict avoidant. Because if they're conflict avoidant, you're not going to get anything done. And that was the problem in the state of Nevada. Most all these people that are in leadership, they're conflict avoidant. Well, why is that a problem? Well, they're not willing to tell the employee what areas they need to work on and improve. They need to talk to employees about what they're failing in. And when necessary, they need to do a performance improvement plan for those employees that are failing miserably. And I would tell you, I developed that from scratch out in Kwajalein. We didn't have an evaluation system. We developed a very simple evaluation system that rewarded performance. And those people that got 4s and 5s on the evaluation got raises, and those that got anything less didn't. It's an accountability thing. People are very motivated by that. And so my whole effort is to make sure that people are accountable and that they're not conflict avoidant as leaders.
Well, I learned a new term the other day from you and somebody else. I can't remember who we were talking to, but the term is that it's called up or out. Is that either you get promoted up or you leave the military? Makes sense to me. I mean, that should be the way that it is in government, that either you go up, you get promoted, or you go out because you're not worthy of being a public servant. Do you agree with that mentality being pushed through your administration?
Well, I think that's exactly what happens. You know, when I go into the different jobs in the military that I led, you know, people talk to me about, you know, what they did. They were a plumber, they were an electrician, they were an engineer or whatever. But when my example is the city of Reno. I walked into the city of Reno. Well, you know what people were talking about? They were talking to me about how many years they had left to retire. It's an entitlement culture. It's got to change. It's got to be a culture that's about supporting the citizens and the taxpayers and thinking every dollar is their own and treating it that way, because taxpayer dollars are far and few in between. And we have so many needs in Nevada, we can no longer have that mentality. In the military, up or out basically meant you either got promoted or you retired. And we don't have that in Nevada. It's basically everybody's talking about 30 years and getting on the gravy train after 30 years. You know, the federal government went away from this they call it I call it fixed. I forget the exact name for it, but it's a fixed retirement system. In other words, they get so months a month based on how many years they have. Right. Well, the federal government doesn't do that anymore. They have a thrifty program, and each person that's in the federal government now basically puts money into that system. That there is some government match, but it's basically on the onus of the employee to take care of that. You know, we have a horrendously expensive PERS system, and I understand that. I mean, I think that a lot of people are in favor of the PERS system, but when the costs are getting to be astronomical and we're not funding it properly, which is happening in Nevada, for those of you that don't know it, the PERS system is not being adequately funded like it should be, and that needs to be worked on, like all the other things, with people that are willing to take on the hard issues. Like
let me ask you this. Well, let me ask you this, because I've gotten to know you over the last year, and excuse me, you know, first look, you look like a bookworm, a little nerdy. What I've come to find is that that's the outer layer. That's what people see, and that's reading a book by its cover. Explain to the people who are watching your determination to get this done, and why you believe that it's so important that you're the one to do it at this point in history.
Well, at this point in history, I mean, I'm a very quick study of people and issues, and I understand where people are coming from very quickly. And I look at the candidates out there for your governor, and they're all weak. They're career politicians. They're one-trick ponies, meaning they only have done one thing in their life, and that's not going to get you where you need to go. And many of them are weak and don't have the intestinal fortitude to deal with it. Our sheriff, we call him Status Quo Joe. How can you say, if working as the sheriff for as long as he has, that it's acceptable that his crime rate is worse than New York or Los Angeles? You want that guy running your government? I mean, if he can't do it for the sheriffs in that smaller organization, how is he going to do it for a much larger organization? So, you know, you all can't afford Status Quo Joe. You need somebody tough and strong, and someone who has the intestinal fortitude to actually be a change agent and revolutionize government and politics in Nevada.
Well, when we get to education, one of the things I've been working in politics for the last 15 years, and here's what I've realized. Ask a politician what their accomplishments are. They will not hesitate to tell you. And it's funny, in talking to some of the politicians when I got to Nevada, I asked them, I said, well, what are some of the biggest accomplishments that you've had so far? And every one of them pointed to that stadium here in Las Vegas. Every single one of them. Have you seen the stadium? Have you seen the stadium? I mean, they're so excited. Have you seen the stadium? They get things done that are important to them. How long did it take that stadium to go through? How long did it take that process to come to fulfillment, fruition? How long did it take? Meanwhile, the children of Nevada have been suffering in 50th place in education for 40 years. But you got a new stadium. Well, with any luck, they'll be just smart enough to be able to work there. With that being said, we're going to play Tom's education commercial again. We'll play it one more time. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about some other things. But with that, we'll be back in just a moment. And with that being said, here we go.
I approve this message.
Why is the Nevada education system last in the nation? Simple. Career politicians don't care about your children's education. If they did, Nevada wouldn't rank last. Tom Heck is running for governor for one reason: to revolutionize Nevada state government, beginning with education. But if 50th place is good enough for your kids, just keep voting for the career politicians. Otherwise, it's time to vote for a proven conservative leader. It's time to vote Tom Heck for governor.
I approve this message.
Meet Sheriff Joe Lombardo. Lombardo claims to be a conservative Republican just like you. So as a conservative, when was the last time you wrote a $5,000 check to a Democrat candidate? And not just to any candidate, but to the same guy you say you want to defeat this fall. Yeah, no matter how you spin it, Lombardo's $5,000 donation to Sisolak just doesn't pass the smell test. So here's the question: can we trust Lombardo to fight for us with such a rich history of supporting Democrats? No. The answer is no.
No, the answer is no.
The answer
you can't
is
trust
no.
Joe. Status quo Joe. Let's talk about what's going on with Lombardo. So when I came to talk to you the first time, and we started going through what you were going to have to do to even be successful at what you're getting ready to do, one of the first things I told you would be the shenanigans and the backdoor deals. Everyone in the state of Nevada knows that Joe Lombardo is unfit for this office. He's not a conservative. He's never voted conservative. He's never done anything conservative. He says he is, but so does John Lee. And John Lee was a Democrat up until a year ago. So with the situation currently in the state of Las Vegas, if Joe Lombardo gets in office, what do you expect to happen? If he's able to beat Sisolak in the fall, which I find doubtful, because the Democrats have already poured in $2.5 million into the campaign this week. So they're trying to get Joe out. If that's the case, what would you do as leader of the Republican Party, as the new governor of the state of Nevada?
Well, status quo Joe is not going to change anything for the state of Nevada. So if you want the status quo, Joe's the guy. If you really want something different, if you want to really revolutionize government and politics in Nevada, I'm the guy. I looked across the board at all these guys. I looked at their websites. They have empty promises, but they have no idea. They have no idea how to be a change agent and how to develop processes and procedures that actually make government work. I do. I've done this over and over. Probably half a dozen times I had to be a change agent in an organization that was actually failing, like the state of Nevada government is actually failing. I mean, ask anybody that tried to get unemployment checks during COVID. They couldn't get anyone to answer the phone. They couldn't get anyone to there was no ability to leave a voice message. And any calls that they did leave, they didn't get a return call. I mean, this is taxpayer money. They're owed to answer the phone and get back to constituents. They're not doing it because the processes are all broken. They don't know what checklists are. They don't know how to develop lessons learned from things they've done. And they don't know how to put a program together to make sure they cover all the bases.
Well, what about accountability? You talk about it all the time. How do you instill that in people? How do you get that other than firing the top three layers and bringing people up or bringing new people in? How else do you get people to create that culture of accountability where they won't cover for other people? They won't hide up. They won't hide when someone's done something wrong or something that isn't on the up and up. How do you do that?
Well, there's two pieces that I use. The first is you always have an annual performance plan of what the employee is supposed to do. And I certainly would do that with my department heads. And that determines what they're going to do, when they're going to do it. And that's key. The other piece of it is what I've done and what I've seen senior leaders do is they sit down with a slideshow. Well, what's a slideshow? Well, you go through and find out with the different departments what their critical success factors are, and you build a slide on each one and determine metrics or measures for those particular issues that are critical success factors. And so what I find is when you go do those slideshows, for instance, at Quadrant, my slideshow was about 120 pages. I had everything from public works, housing, transient, and permanent party. I had boats, big boats, maintaining and operating boats and moving people and parts across 7 different islands. I had automotive, and on. And basically, I had a slideshow that basically hit the critical success factors for all those departments that I saw every week. And based on those, we made adjustments. And when I needed to engage, I took their feedback and took care of the issues that were in their way. And otherwise, they held themselves pretty much accountable through the slideshow. It's a very effective management tool for accountability. And then you add to that a performance plan. And basically, their performance determines a raise or a bonus. I will work with legislators to see if we can institute some type of a bonus for the leadership in Nevada, so they have a dog in that fight, if you will. It's accountability and ownership that makes my approach different and effective.
So when you do this, do you expect that there will be pushback from the unions or other state groups?
Well, I mean, there always is. People, as a rule, don't like change. And if you talk about the people that do the quality programs, one of the big things is continuous process improvement. Well, you've reached your goal of continuous process improvement when every time you do something, you reassess and determine if you could have done it better. The problem in the state of Nevada is, and especially in government, is they typically want to do the same thing over and over and over, no matter how poor it's being performed or how badly the outcomes are. They want to do it over and over the same. What you got to do is find a way to empower them to find a better way. And that's why I think I've talked before about the Office of Inspector General, where we talk about fraud, waste, and abuse. And then we talk about better ways of doing business for government. And when you have this entity, an Office of Inspector General, that works just directly for me as the governor, that provides the clout for them to implement these things. In the Air Force, at one base, Travis Air Force Base in California, we had a program, a quality program, that basically said the only one that has the power to say no to a good idea was the wing commander. And we made some significant improvements. And it was more people motivated because they were the ones that were making the changes. And I have my experience in all this time I've been doing this, is oftentimes employees know the problem at the working level, and they actually know the best solution. It's not that hard.
Well, here's what's interesting, and you brought up the Office of Inspector General. We had an interesting experience here in the last week or week and a half with the Las Vegas Sun. They did an interview with you. You had mentioned that you wanted to start an Office of OIG or an OIG, and they corrected you in print, saying that you didn't know what you were talking about, that the state of Nevada already had an OIG, and you had to call them out on it. Can you explain what happened in that?
Well, yeah, I basically, got them the proof that they needed, and they had to go back and do a mea culpa and said we were wrong. Yes, there is a subset of an OIG in the Department of Prisons and Corrections, but they don't have an Office of Inspector General directly responsible to the governor to root out fraud, waste, and abuse. And they were wrong. And they were wrong on
well, let's go back. Let's go back. They were wrong on a few things in this article, and they tried to correct you as fact checkers in real time, and the facts were on your side. Just like there is no Office of OIG in the state of Nevada. It's an extension. It's an extension of the Office of Inspector General from DC. It has no power, no oversight in the state other than prisons. So It will not protect you from waste, fraud, and abuse. So again,
good ideas.
Well, again, Tom, it comes down to somebody with an agenda that they want to make you look bad, and so they'll go out of their way and they read the headline. They won't go into the subject or the matter of it and get into the meat of it and see, right? Because when we were told that, what did we do? What was the first thing that we did? We went and looked.
Well,
that doesn't make sense.
I have a researcher that basically told me there was no such thing. And then when they saw the article, they says they're getting away with it. They don't know what they're talking about. They didn't do their research. And then I got an email back from the person who says, well, I guess I really didn't do a very good job of researching because I only found the one on the prisons. And so,
and that's the problem. That's the problem with the fact checkers, though. That's the issue with this I'm going to check on you, and I'm going to be the one that determines if you're telling the truth or not, as opposed to letting the reader or anybody else do that. If you interview somebody, it's an interview. It's their thoughts. It's their opinions. You don't have to fact check their opinions. They're opinions. That's what I believe.
If you fact check, if you're going to do that, you have to reference it. Just like everybody that's going to paper.
Well, Tom, not only do you have to reference it, not only do you have to reference it, you have to be correct. It would help to be correct. It would help to be right. And in 3 of them, well, when I say she was incorrect in all of them, she was incorrect in all of them. It was sad because she wanted to say that certain things weren't true. Here's where they are. They've retracted them, but they still think that there wasn't anything wrong with the 2020 election. They think the 2020 election went off without a problem. Tom, do you believe that the 2020 election went off without a hit?
No, it was an abysmal failure. And I mean, you find fraud everywhere. You got the 2020 mules out there that's been recently done, but every day more and more comes out about how bad the election was and the things that they've done. What was there? I think it was Pennsylvania. They mailed out 85,000. I think that was the number, 85,000 mail-in ballots.
Oh, no.
170 came back. They reproduced on the way in.
Right. They had 170,000 more ballots come in than they mailed out. Now, here's what's interesting. Go look that up. You can't find information on that story anymore. All you find are the fact checkers saying it's bullshit. That's all you get. No,
and I bet you the Sun won't find retraction.
Right. So as governor, you become governor. What are you going to do about what happened in 2020?
Well, we're certainly going to audit 2020 and basically audit for lesson learned by some independent group and see how we can do better. And then we're going to audit 2022 and 2024. And as long as I'm in office, we will do annual audits. It's no different than military did when we have a big exercise in Korea, 35,000 troops. And after every exercise like that, we sit down, everybody gets at the table, and they develop lessons learned. And everybody documents what worked and what didn't work. And then out of that becomes an action plan so that the next time in the next year, we have another exercise like that, we've learned from it. And if you're not a learning organization, and that's what that's called, if you're not a learning organization, you're stuck in the status quo and waddling in minutia. And that's what was wonderful about the government. So we want to do that for elections. The other thing I want to do for election is we can't afford to have election supervisors that are appointed by bureaucrats. I'm going to propose to the legislature and get it passed that all the election supervisors are elected by the voters. They need to be beholden to you. And if you don't like what they're doing, fire them in the voting box.
Exactly. And that's what we need to do. What we've learned over the last 2 years in America is just how corrupt everything is. We were just going along status quo, life was good, and all of a sudden we realized how much we're being screwed on a daily basis. And that's why Tom's running. So Tom, let's go in depth about the 2020 election. What your plan is a little bit more in depth. Some others have said they're going to do things, but they haven't gone into detail on how you're going to do it. So yours is first, and I'll let you explain in depth, but you want to task the state police with investigating claims of fraud. You want to audit the 2020 election and the 2022 election, as well as elections forward. Now, the question is that's expensive to do on a statewide basis. Would you look at doing it as a spot audit to where you would go into certain precincts or certain counties or certain areas and say, we're just going to audit this area or this precinct just to look for anomalies and never let anybody know that it would be the governor's discretion as to when those audits got done? Is that something that you would?
Well, my experience in this is you got to establish a baseline. We have no baseline right now. So you got to do a full-blown audit. And basically the baseline is not so much looking at each ballot and all that, but it's looking at the process and finding out from the workers where it broke down, what kind of complaints we had, where we had shortfalls, and then try to improve it. But I do think that the 2021 needs to be that way. Now in 2022, it may be that if we get those processes implemented effectively and timely, then maybe we can do spot checks in the different counties and looking for certain things that become what I would call critical success for the voting offices and the supervisors of election. So we put those critical success factors out there, and then that's what the auditor goes checks on.
Again, when you talk about critical success factor, kind of go into depth about that. Some people are confused about what that means. What is a critical success factor? Other than, is it just a fancy word for the a fancy word for the word goal?
Well, I think it's let's talk about your dinner. Well, what are the critical success factors for all of you out there fixing a dinner? Well, first off, you got to have the right groceries, and then you got to have a recipe, and then you got to have plates, forks, and knives. You have to have a place to eat. I mean, those right there are probably the 5 key critical success factors for cooking a dinner. And then you have to have a cook, right? So that's the type thing you look at for the elections. Off the top of my head, I would say you look for the critical success factors would be do we have confidence that we actually had IDs for all the people that were coming through, or that they met the standards that we now have in place, which my understanding is not IDs, but we have to look at those type things. Were the ballots secure? Were the boxes for collection secure? Were they camerized? Did the cameras work on the boxes?
Exactly.
Those are the kind of critical things that you look at to determine whether you were successful or not.
Yeah, that's what they came out today.
And the ultimate success factor is that people think it's fair.
Well, that's it right there. Do they trust it? Do they trust the election was fair? That's the ultimate success factor in an election. Do people trust the results? I mean, I don't get it. I mean, if I go to the bank and we're exchanging dollars back and forth, before I leave, I count my money. It's not that I don't trust the bank. It's just I don't trust anyone. So I always count it. And we should do the same thing with the elections. The fact that the Democrats have fought so hard nationally against looking into the elections, can you explain why they would fight transparency? Why you think they would?
Well, because they don't believe they can win on the facts, and they can't. They don't believe they can win on the issues, and they can't. And so when you don't trust the fact that you have a message that sells, I mean, that's what marketing is. If you don't have a message that sells, then you got to come up with plan B. And that's their plan B is fraud. And I do believe that there was plenty of fraud in this election, especially in the battleground states. I mean, how do in these battleground states all the election offices close at the same time?
Yep.
To do that, it'd be miraculous even if you tried to do it.
Yeah, and not just in one state, but across those 6 battleground states, closing at the exact same time. That means that somebody had to make a decision and call the other 6 states and say, okay, we're going to all stop, because they stopped at the exact. It wasn't a trickle effect. They stopped at the exact same time. So that first starts with what's it called? That's the 3 C's, right? It's not collusion. It's communication equals collusion equals conspiracy. Do you think that what Mueller is doing, not Mueller, do you think that what's going on with the Sussman trial now with Durham, do you think that we'll start to hear more and more of this drip out before the 22 midterms or the actual general this fall?
Well, absolutely. The question is are the voters listening? And I hope the voters are listening to what's coming out. That basically this impeachment of Trump on 2 separate occasions was a fraud. I mean, you start there with the fraud. I mean, nobody in the history of America as a president has ever been treated so disrespectfully and basically with a group of lies.
Well, and here, Tom, think about this. The people that were in charge of investigating him knew it was false. They knew from the beginning that what they were saying was a lie, and they were going out to the American people on a regular basis and doing that.
Well, yeah, the Sussman report tells you that the FBI colluded, the leadership in the FBI colluded, Hillary Clinton colluded with her lawyer. I mean, it's all a bunch of lies. And then we had Mueller, who was tasked to investigate this independently. And either one, he knew that Hillary was guilty of directing all this, or 2, he was unable to find it, and both are bad.
Well, one of the questions that come up is, well, you guys are in Nevada. Why are you concerned about what happened in Georgia and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania? Tom, why are you concerned? Why do you want to go back and look at it?
Well, you have to understand that where the truth was and where it wasn't, so that you can move forward. And if you don't understand how bad it was, you can't correct what was happening. And we need to correct that and prevent it from happening in the future. We can't afford to have a president impeached purely for political means and a way of getting rid of him. It was absolutely criminal in my mind.
Yeah, because we saw what happened with Nixon back in 70, 72, that era. And what he did, rightfully so, should have been impeached, should have been removed from office. In fact, probably should have gone to jail. That would, if he'd gone to prison instead of being pardoned by Ford, I think it would have changed the dynamics on how people looked at doing these types of things.
But that was back when both parties were fair and basically gave fair hearing to that. This is all purely political. The Democrats have done more to make this country divisive. Race, creed, color, everything is always about being divisive. We've got different groups out there, special interest groups, and everything that they're doing. We are more divisive as a country than we've ever been. This is a melting pot. America is more diverse than any nation in the world, and people don't get that.
Yep, they don't get it. They don't understand it. They want to be like Sweden. They say, well, we want what they have. Well, they're 98% white. There is no diversity in the Netherlands, none. And they are very tight on immigration. They don't have open borders. They just don't. So this crap that you've been fed, that the Democrats have fed, what they've said for the last 20, 30, 40 years has been a lie. There is no problem with our immigration system.
And I don't believe we have. And we don't have systematic racism either.
No,
I mean, but the Democrats have been.
We don't have systemic. Yes, systemic racism.
We don't have systemic racism.
No, we don't have systemic racism. Tom, it's a way of making money, both on the left and the right. Let me explain real quick. Then I'm going to let Tom talk from his heart, because I really want him to talk to you tonight. This is one of the most important lives that we've done since I've been with Tom. I joined this campaign because of what Tom brings to it from an experience level, but also what his commitment is to the Constitution, and not just saying that, but he's already committed 23 years of his life. He could have been doing anything else with his education. He could have traveled anywhere around the world and been successful, far more successful financially than he was serving in the military. So why did you do it? Tom, tell us why you served in the military, why you joined, why you continue to stay in the military, and why you're running for governor, and how those are all intertwined.
Well, I think it started, my dad was a Marine. I mean, he had 2 Purple Hearts, and he was a pro football player, and he lost that because of going to war. He was not able to play ball anymore. The other thing is, my dad suffered through PTSD all those years, and he made that sacrifice so that we could be free. And people could be patriots, and they could salute the flag and look at the flag and sing the national anthem. And I'm watching all that's being destroyed in front of my eyes. And for me, the passion is that I don't see anybody that can change that. And if I don't step up and do it, no one will do it. And so I'm looking for the voters to say enough is enough. And they want someone that actually do the job. And I can do that. And I will revolutionize government and politics in Nevada like no one's ever seen before. I'm for the silent majority. I want to be the spokesman for those people that are trying to survive in this awfully inflated environment where the inflation is just destroying them. The utility bills are high. The gas bills are high. The food prices are high. We're out of formula. This isn't the America that my dad served and fought for. None of this stuff should have ever happened. Is because of incompetent bureaucrats and career politicians who can't stand up to those special interests and fix things that need to be fixed. I mean, how many years has the federal government been trying to fix immigration? Last I remember was before Ronald Reagan. We're still haven't been able to fix that. And now we've got open borders. Just the other day, I saw an article. We've got terrorists coming in. I don't want to have to take an Uzi down the street to protect myself from terrorism. I mean, that's where we're going to. The law and order has gone out the door. I am so fed up with that. People need to be safe in Nevada. They need to be able to live, work, and play wherever they want. And we're not doing that. And the open borders is putting us more in risk. We're bringing diseases in, and then we're bringing people that we're putting right on the doles. They're busting them into the states in the middle and flying them in the middle of the night. It's criminal. I don't want that. In Nevada, those that are illegals, putting them on a bus convoy to Delaware and Washington, D.C., just like Governor Abbott. I mean, this really irks me. We can't have this anymore. And I'm imploring the voters in Nevada, pick someone that can do the job for a change, not the career politicians who have destroyed the state for the last 40 years. I'm the guy. I'll do the job. I will make your lives better.
That's one of the things that keeps coming up, right? We look at the candidates that are running, and there's a number of candidates that have unique backgrounds, but nobody that is as unique and qualified as what Tom Heck is bringing to the table. Listen, for those of you who may or may not know me from social media, I don't get behind losing horses. I believe in what Tom Heck brings because we have to get rid of the Dean Hellers. Look what he already did to you. Tom ran against Dean Heller in 2018, and you voted for Heller. You voted for the career guy. You voted for the establishment guy because, well, I'm going to vote for the devil I know, not the one I didn't. How'd that turn out for you? How does it turn out for you when you vote? We've got to get these people that have been in the system forever. And I came from politics. I've been doing it for the last 15 years. We've got to get rid of the career politicians. Why do you think that Trump was so successful? Because he was a populist. He wasn't part of the system. He could break all the rules because the rules didn't apply to him. He could speak freely because he wasn't worried about Mitch McConnell holding money up or putting a primary against him. That's how this game is played. Threats being made continually behind the scenes. That's what Tom will put a stop to. Tom, tell us why you think that Nevada has brighter days ahead of it, but what's the one thing that you think they've got to get rid of immediately before they can have that?
Well, they got to get rid of the career politicians, and they've got to get rid of those people that are conflict avoidant. And we've got to bring accountability to the state and a methodology for continuous process improvement, because every day government runs, it should get better. And this thing about when I talked to a legislator some time ago, and it was really irritating. I was asking them how they got rid of programs that didn't work. He looked at me strangely and said, "We don't do that. We just go determine how much more money we're going to go back to the taxpayers for." They're telling you they're going to go back into your pockets for more of your hard-earned money. That is unacceptable.
Well, it is, and it's criminal. And Tom, so what you were describing before I left the screen, what you were describing is you want to run the state like a business, accountability, and you only have so much money. You don't have an unlimited group that you can pull from. I mean, let me liken it the way that I look at taxes and how politicians spend. We've all seen what was his name, Robin Hood. Well, what were they railing against in Robin Hood? Taxes. It was always taxes. The sheriff would come in and he'd raise the taxes and he'd come in and take it from the people because the king said, I need more money. So he'd just go down to the people and take it. Well, what's the difference here? We have representative government, but they don't represent us. They're not held accountable. And the fact that you keep voting them in time, it gives them this feeling of invulnerability that they'll always be here. And so they don't care about you anymore because they're always going to be there. So they start being a tool of special interest and lobbyists and PACs. And that's where we are today. That's why let me say this and I'll wrap up. That's why you have a $2 billion stadium in Las Vegas and you're 50th in education. That's what's going on in this state. Tom, correct me if
you're absolutely right. And the other thing we have to get rid of is the rhinos. And I heard someone, how are you going to reach across the aisle? Well, if people are doing things that are totally contrary to your interests, why would you reach across the aisle? I am going to campaign as your governor for those conservatives in all the key elections to make sure we start putting forth conservative candidates into these jobs and stop putting rhinos in there. I mean, let's look at that commerce tax that we had. Republican Assembly, a Republican Senate, and a Republican governor. They were all rhinos. And we can't continue that path. We're going to get rid of the rhinos, and we're going to get conservatives in place to make the lives of Nevadans where they live, work, and play better.
Well, and that's one of the things. I came out to Nevada to help, Tom, because I was part of the team in Indiana that gave Indiana a supermajority in the Senate and a supermajority in the House. It took us several years, and there was a group of us, but we worked together over that period to find great candidates throughout the state. We went to entrepreneurs, we went to business owners, and we said, listen, you've done great in the state. Please give back by coming and giving us some of your time and experience in the Senate and then the House to make our state better. And when we started doing that, and we got rid of the guys who couldn't cut it, right? They couldn't make it in the business world, so I'll be a politician. When we got rid of them, the state suddenly cleaned up. I mean, they just found out in Indiana, they just found out that we've got $2.5 billion in rainy day funds. I'm sorry, I correct that. We've got $5.5 billion, and they're going to release $2.5 billion back to the people. They want to keep something in the rainy day fund. That's what's happening in Indiana. And in Indiana, in the community that I come from, 98% graduate from high school. 92% go on to graduate from college. It can happen, but you've got to put effort behind it, and it's not just money. Tom, I'm going to let you talk here for a minute. Talk about your plan and what you see different, and how on day one, some of the initiatives that you would like to get going from both, number one, an executive order, which is, I think, frowned upon. People are tired of the executive order thing, right? But what power you would have to not keep it forever, but to get to initiate change, right? What would you do first on day one through executive order? And what would you do with the state party? The state party in this state is in disarray. How would you fix both of those situations starting on day one? What's your plan?
Well, first and foremost, we're going to run Nevada like a business. And on day one, the executive orders is to get rid of this CRT, but that's not going to. It's incestuous. It's got little fingers everywhere into the school system, and it's just so problematic. So the accountability part is I'm going to have someone visit each of these schools on a quarterly basis to ascertain from the students what kind of things that they're learning and what the message is from the schools to make sure that the CRT is gone. Because just because you say you're going to do something doesn't mean it's going to happen at the working level. But again, let me
jump in on you. Let me jump in on that. So with that being said, would you advocate for the ability for audits in schools? Because right now they're not wanting to share in other school systems. They're not wanting to share the plan, the lesson planning for those classes. Would you make the lesson planning public domain as well as everything else, that it's all public? Everything in public schools is public. There's nothing private, correct?
Well, that's true. But as the new governor, I'm going to audit every department. We're going to have an audit in every department to determine what needs to get fixed and what needs to be done. Especially the first focus will be on the Department of Education, and basically dictating to them that they need to audit each and every school district and find out where the money is. I've heard of loss $30 million. I've heard of loss of $300 million and $60 million. And you know what? Everybody says, well, whatever happened to it? Nobody ever ran it to ground to figure out where that lost money went. We're going to audit them, and we're going to find the money. And those that are committing criminal acts and stealing your taxpayer dollars are going to jail, period. But we're going to fix that by auditing them. That's the only way. You got to start from a baseline, and the audits provide you a good baseline.
Okay, well, let's assume that you've won the election. You win the primary, and you go up against Sisolak this fall, and you're in a debate. What three questions would you ask Steve Sisolak that would show his record is an abysmal failure?
Well, first and foremost with Steve Sisolak is you ask him, what was the impact of the decision to shut down the state? What was the impact on people to not wear masks, to wear masks? And what harm have we caused people by forcing them into vaccine? Every day we're seeing more and more results of the state being shut down, the economy's in the toilet, vaccines are making people sick, and then we've got the problems with the mask and the children in school. And what is the unintended consequences of his actions? He's not talked about the unintended consequences. He talks recently, they've told him that he needs to be more conservative. He talks about cutting taxes. He talks about, it's just all show and tell because he's not going to do that. He's failed you miserably. And as a leader, I know as a leader, you can't lead from behind. He's in Las Vegas when most of the staff is up in Carson City. You can't do business that way. And then that's the other question is how did you work with the staff, being 5 hours away or an hour away by airplane? How can you possibly do that? And then if you look at what he did is, why did it always happen 2 weeks later that what Governor Newsom did in California, you did in Nevada?
Well, I think we all know the answer to that. I think we all know the answer to that, Tom. I mean, we know that he's a puppet. He's a puppet of the DNC. He has less of a backbone than the Lombardo does, and that's not saying much. So I mean, here's what we've got. Here's what we've got in the nation. We have problems across the nation, and of all those problems, Nevada comes in last in a lot of different areas, but education being most important. One of the reasons I came out here to work with Tom is because of the abysmal education system in this country. I raised myself I was raised in poverty, and education is what saved me. And it can do the same for other children in the state. That's why we have to fight so hard for it. When Tom said that was his #1 goal, and of course this is all before the inflation started, right? That's a topic that a governor can touch on, but really education is where he can make an impact that doesn't impact just you today, but your children for the rest of their lives. This is most likely, and their children. And this is most likely the most important election, not only in Nevada, but U.S. history. We are at a pinnacle, people. And if we do not come together and put people in office that are willing to make change, that are willing to take the slings and arrows of office and willing to stand up to the powers that be and not be owned by them, we've got to start getting out of the career politician bucket and going to grassroots people, patriots, servants of the people that are willing to serve. Tom, eloquate, talk about what you see, your big vision for Nevada.
Well, the big vision is a government that actually works and less government. We don't need more government. I am very much a supporter of the Second Amendment. There's pieces it's a right. The Constitution doesn't say that maybe or could be or you can do this or that. No, it's a right. A right means it's right, and the government needs to make sure it gets out of the way. Right now, we pay a fee to get a CCW, a concealed weapons permit. Well, the fees end on day one. I'm in office with an executive order. We're not charging people to do something that's a right, and we'll do that until such time as we get constitutional carry. The second piece of that is the governor. It's really a sacred duty I consider protecting Nevadans. The second piece of it is there are women and spouses that are abused and threatened for their lives, and they go to get a CCW. And how many times in the paper you've heard they got their CCW approved on the day they were murdered by their spouse? That's not going to happen in Nevada. We're going to require the police to speed up their CCW to 5 days or less. And if they can't get them a CCW, then they need to find a way to protect those people in the short term until they're the same thing with stalkers and anyone else. The other piece of it is we have these gun-free zones. Well, I ask you voters, where are the shootings in this country? They are in gun-free zones.
Yep.
So if we have a gun-free zone in Nevada, the agency responsible for that area will be required to provide armed protection at their expense for the Nevadans. So gun-free means they can hire their own armed protection. Otherwise, citizens will do it themselves. And that's my solemn duty to protect all Nevadans. Those are the pieces that are missing right now that no one's talking about. The ability to have armed citizens to take care of themselves when the police are 15 minutes to 30 minutes away. And those areas that want to be gun-free, fine. Hire your own private security at your own expense, but get it done. But if you don't protect the citizens, then we're going to open you up to liability for not protecting them, and you will pay dearly.
Well, that's exactly what happened with that shooting in Buffalo. If you look at what just happened in Buffalo, I mean, some of the victims afterwards said if more people had guns, this wouldn't have happened. If more people had been able to defend themselves, not so many would have been killed. The answer is more guns. I can't remember who said it, but when everyone has a gun, it's a more polite society.
Well, it takes a citizen with a gun to prevent an armed assailant.
You're right. You're right.
That's what it takes.
So let's walk through this real quick. So First Amendment. let's talk about free speech in this country. What's your position on free speech? How far does it go? And do private companies have the right to tell you what you can and can't say, even on their platforms?
Well, I think freedom of speech is the whole basis for democracy. And without freedom of speech, you've lost a democracy. Every day we've got this wokeness. I mean, I've talked to people. It used to be, sticks and stones may break my bones, words will never hurt me. But people now, well, I'm not going to speak up in public about what I really think, because someone might woke me, someone might attack my daughter, they might attack my home. So we are so bad that way. And so I'm going to follow in Governor DeSantis' footsteps, and we're going to pass a law that says those businesses like that are basically censoring your speech, they're going to be open to liability, and we're going to sue them, and we're going to fine them, and we're going to,
and there may be
do
pathways
everything we can to return freedom of speech.
And people haven't really looked at this yet. States haven't been looking at this yet. But if you do business in the state, I mean, just like the insurance business, they can pass very strict laws to mandate or to be able to control that service in that state. And Facebook and Twitter and the rest of them, they can't afford not to utilize. They can't say we're not going to be in the state of Nevada.
Well, but see, if you watch all what's going on in the country, it becomes contagious. So once Florida does it, and then we do it in Nevada, they'll do it in Texas, they'll do it in Wisconsin. And then all of a sudden, even if we get to half, I think there's 32 Republican-led state governments, and we get 32 of them, then these companies are stuck with telling the truth and stop the censoring. How can you have Ayatollah Khomeini on the website, and you can't have President Trump speaking his truth?
Well, and,
I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
The double-edged sword is that the people who are doing this think that they're always going to be in power. They think they're always going to have leverage. And what we've seen is it's a perfect example. Most people don't know that, right now there are, I think that I was just told that when the .com bubble burst, there were so many people, so many players in the system. And what's happened is they've been whittled down, and we've got Facebook now, we've got Twitter now. And they think that they're the dominant ones, but they don't have any idea what's coming down around the corner in new technology. Or there's some kid out there that's just like Zuckerberg, working in his college dorm, trying to create the next big thing. And when that happens, they're big ships. They're unchangeable. They cannot change fast enough. So I think that it's an effort of what you're doing, both with the making a new law to where you say, this is what free speech means in our state. If you want to do business in our state, this is what you have to allow our citizens to do. Is that roughly what you're planning on doing? Something along that line?
Well, pretty much. And the other thing that's going on in these .coms is these bots. There's an argument right now with Twitter is that they said they only have 5% bots. Well, there was an
substantially higher.
There was an individual that had like 50,000 followers, I think, that I heard from someone. And then all of a sudden they cleaned out the bots, and he had 900 people he'd been talking to for 5 or 10 years. And he thought he had a big clientele that was helping him. So there's a lot of problems with this, but we need to stop the censorship. Everyone has a right to speak their piece and speak their truth. And we can't let those companies dictate what those truths should or shouldn't be. I mean, as a conservative, I've even having problems on some of these websites getting my message out because want to stymie me, and even if they slow me down, they're still affecting my ability to get my message out.
Exactly. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting that the ones that want to do the censoring right now, they do it because, well, they're offended. And if you look at the Constitution is clear. You have a right to free speech. You do not have a right to not be offended.
and any other citizen has no power to offend anybody else. Only people can decide for themselves if they're offended. And it's a personal decision to be offended. You ignore it and you move on. And that's what it used to be, the sticks and stones story. And we're not doing that. Everybody's taking everything personal. They need to get over it because everybody's entitled to their truth. That's what freedom of speech is. And our forefathers were very much specific on what that meant to the country. And without freedom of speech, everything else becomes moot.
Exactly. The founding fathers knew it because they had battled it. It's not an idea. It wasn't a theory to them. They were actually fighting for their lives and fully understood what the ramifications of their decisions were and why free speech was the most important right above all. Number one, They knew it, and it's sad that so many politicians now are not realizing that. I don't know if you saw the piece from Davos today, where one of the ladies in a discussion group said, "Well, there's a lot of polarity right now in the system, and it's so polarized, and we really need to get down to a single truth, a single idea of what truth is. So we need to reevaluate what free speech is."
Well, a single truth is communism. They tell you
Yeah.
exactly what you're going to think. So
Yep.
what are you talking about? People do not understand communism or socialism. America is becoming high in socialism. We're basically governments intruding into people's lives, dictating what they're doing on too many levels. Someone asked the other day about, well, we should have a legislative session every year. And my comment was, why? To pass more laws to restrict your freedoms?
Exactly.
To tax more money from your pocket? Yep. That is not what we want. We don't want more government. We don't want more taxes. We want less government, less taxes, and we want the government to be responsive, effective, and efficient with the money of yours that they spend, the money of yours that they spend. And they need to be running government like a business to treat your tax dollars as their own.
Well, some people will say, Tom, that what you're saying is just making a lot of claims that you'll say anything to get into office. Then once you get into office, you'll change. With that being said, your commitment to limiting government it goes down to your core. You were sickened by what Sisolak did during COVID and the shutdowns and so on. Explain your plan to limit the governor's ability to have endless emergency.
Well, we've done that across several states, where the governors have taken emergency authority and just used it continuously. What that's called? It's called dictatorship. I'm going to send legislation as quickly as possible to basically limit the government's authority to 30 days, and the legislature can extend it to up to 90 days. But we need 30 days so the legislature, in a big a state as we are, can get together, feedback from their constituents to determine what path they want to follow. And I, as the governor, will follow the will of the people. And that's what I believe in. And then if need be, then I'll step in for another 60 days based on what the legislature feels that needs to be done. But we're not going to have a dictatorship in Nevada, and we're not going to shut down the economy, and we are not going to get between you and your doctor. That is sacrosanct. It's been sacrosanct for years and years. And all of a sudden now somebody creates a pandemic, and now you can't talk to your doctor about what's best for you and decide for yourself. That's freedom, and that's dictatorial stuff that does not need to happen.
Exactly.
Will never happen again.
A flu that is so bad, you lose your rights. The flu is so bad, you lose your First Amendment rights. And we're looking at the Second Amendment. We're taking a look into that as well.
And what we're going to find out, and it's already starting to come out, people are dying because of the shot. It didn't help COVID, and they were forced to do something that was detrimental to their livelihood, and the government had information. They knew that was true.
Yep. And it's coming out on a daily basis. And with that being said, we have reached the end of tonight's session. With that being said, Tom, let's talk to the people before we leave here again and remind them, number one, why are you running? Why are you so passionate about running for the state of government? Why are you so passionate about education? And what do you hope is the outcome of this campaign, just beyond you winning? I mean, that's the goal, right? But what do you want to see happen past that for the people of Nevada? This is non-political. What do you want to bring to them that nobody else is thinking or talking about now for their lives?
Well, what I hope that comes out of this election is for the voters to take back their power. The voters are being told by the Republican Party, this is the guy, vote for him. He's the one that got some money. Maybe he can't do the job, or maybe hold your nose and vote for him. What I hope the voters get is that they don't get to decide. They don't get to decide which candidate gets to debate. They don't get to decide whether they have money or not. You, the voters, have the power to decide of who you think can run your state the way you want it run, and who can affect change and revolutionize government and revolutionize politics in Nevada, and make your lives where you live, work, and play better, safe, secure, and providing your children with a quality education they deserve and are entitled to, and basically making an environment that not only has job opportunities, but also an education system that also provides our children with the knowledge and experience to take those higher paying jobs. And the outcome is getting voters and knowing that you voters have the choice and that you voters get to change the outcome of this election. You vote for me, we'll revolutionize government and politics in Nevada. It'll be a new day. The sun will shine. The best days of Nevada are ahead. And thank you all for listening to my story tonight. God bless Nevada. God bless the United States. And God bless all of you. Thank you very much.
One last thing. Let's talk about tomorrow real quick. Tomorrow, you will be doing an interview at KPVM TV as well. And I don't know when that's going to re-air, but you're also going to be on the Wayne Allen Root Show tomorrow. At what time? What time is that?
The Wayne Allen Root Show is at 4:30.
Okay.
You can listen to it live on the radio on the Wayne Allen Root Show.
And don't forget, if you have a question for Tom and you weren't able to get it in tonight, that's okay. We'll try and get it next time. But always feel free to call Tom. He has his phone with him all the time. You can call him direct, ask him a question. It is 775-393-0500. That's 775. It's on the screen. I shouldn't have to think about it. It's 775-393-0500. Call him anytime between business hours. Calls at 2 o'clock in the morning, he's probably not going to answer. I might, but he probably won't. Let's see here. I've got one more question in for you from a Robin Landry. Lots of people say you're a great guy, but you have no chance of being elected. What is your response to those folks? Great last question, Tom.
It is a fabulous question. What people don't understand is this is the electronic age. You all know you're on Facebook, you're on Twitter, you're on Instagram. We're doing everything under the radar on all these social media sites. I think we're upwards of hitting almost 100,000 people that are seeing my advertisements. We're on radio. We're starting to be on TV tonight, tomorrow, and for the rest of the next 3 weeks. And by the time the rest of the candidates figure it out, we'll have already won the election. But we're going through it, the electronic age. The Republican Party keeps telling you, you got to do a yard sign, a street sign, a mailer, yada, yada. And the other thing I want to tell you about the Republican Party, they won't give the candidates the emails of all the people that are registered because they are using it to gain money for the party at the expense of the candidates. And almost every candidate has to take money out of his pocket to pay for and to be able to participate in all these things. When I'm governor, I will revolutionize the party so the candidates that are up and coming are not going to have to pay to play. That's what we call it, pay to play, right?
Yep.
You're not going to have candidates pay to play. I think to get on a table on one that I saw yesterday, $250 I have to pay to get a table. I think that if people want the candidates to come and talk, they need to provide those gratis, and the party needs to cover that if necessary. We shouldn't force candidates to pay to play. And that's
well, that's what it's been, and that's what we've seen for a long time, and that's why the establishment is so important to them, because they need those people with that money to be there. If you're coming up as a grassroots candidate, they want to throw everything at you. We have information. You'll want to listen tomorrow to Wayne Allen Root and threats that were made against our campaign by a PAC that is backing Joey Gilbert. That happened tonight. We received a letter from the PAC asking Tom to withdraw when we called and said, hey, listen, we're not going to do it. The election isn't lost yet. We'll know on the 14th if our campaign was unsuccessful. So will you. I said I didn't appreciate the letter. And then their representative went off the rails. We'll be talking about that more tomorrow with Wayne Allen Root. Tom, do you have any last words?
No. God bless you all. Thank you for listening.
Perfect. What we'll do is we'll wrap it up with going to Tom's latest commercials, and we'll see you next week right here, 7 o'clock every Monday night. Tom Heck, Digital Town Hall at electech.com.
Approve this message.
Why is the Nevada education system last in the nation? Simple. Career politicians don't care about your children's education. If they did, Nevada wouldn't rank last. Tom Heck is running for governor for one reason: to revolutionize Nevada state government, beginning with education. But if 50th place is good enough for your kids, just keep voting for the career politicians. Otherwise, it's time to vote for a proven conservative leader. It's time to vote Tom Heck for governor.
I approve this message.
Meet Sheriff Joe Lombardo. Lombardo claims to be a conservative Republican just like you. So as a conservative, when was the last time you wrote a $5,000 check to a Democrat candidate? And not just to any candidate, but to the same guy you say you want to defeat this fall. Yeah, no matter how you spin it, Lombardo's $5,000 donation to Sisolak just doesn't pass the smell test. So here's the question. Can we trust Lombardo to fight for us with such a rich history of supporting Democrats? No. The answer is no.
Thank you for being a part of the Tom Heck Digital Town Hall, where Tom is giving the people of Nevada their voices back. Join Tom every Monday night at 7 p.m. as he discusses his plans for Nevada directly with you, the people of Nevada. Do you still have questions? Call Tom directly, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. at 775-393-0500. That's 775-393-0500. And yes, Tom actually answers his phone. If you'd like to join the Tom Heck for Governor campaign as a volunteer, to make a donation, or both, please visit electtech.com. Thank you again for being a part of Democracy in Action, and only on the Tom Heck Digital Town Hall. Mark your calendar now and plan to join Tom again next Monday night at 7 at electtech.com, as well as these video streaming platforms.